Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 13 of an exciting new series. What if Genius Deku challenged the world without a quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by JayDeeKay on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now, let's dive into the story. Hound Dog let out a loud, growling yawn as he approached the alley. He scratched his shoulder lightly, ducking into the grimy alleyway that Ectoplasm had told him about, and sees the clone hero leaning against a wall. Ectoplasm straightens his posture, approaching Hound Dog. Good. I'm glad you could get here so quickly. Hound Dog grunts in annoyance, checking the time on his watch. Yeah, well, don't expect me to be all sunshine and rainbows, the dog hero growls. You know how I get when I don't get my sleep? I know, Ectoplasm nods. But you should also know that I wouldn't have called you if it wasn't important. Hound Dog groans, but doesn't complain otherwise. Ectoplasm leads him over to the bloodstain on the ground and leans over the dried stain. I'm not sure whose BLD this is, but I know it isn't mine. Ectoplasm stands again, turning to Hound Dog. That means it's likely either Izuku's or, he pauses, never mind. Hound Dog leans down to the stain, then looks up at Ectoplasm from the ground. You should know by now dried BLD isn't a very good smell indicator. I may be able to get a general direction, but beyond that, it'll be difficult. Ectoplasm seems disheartened by this, but nods. Okay, then just do what you can. I'll take it from there. Ectoplasm waits, tapping his false foot on the ground as he waits for Hound Dog. However, Hound Dog stays crouching, staring at Ectoplasm with a complicated expression. What? The clone hero addresses his co-worker. What are you waiting for? Hound Dog continues to stare at Ectoplasm, then sighs, straightening his posture and looking at Ectoplasm with a deadpan stare. All right, Hound Dog leans back. What is this really about? Ectoplasm seems stunned. What do you mean? First, Hound Dog begins counting off his fingers. You call me in the middle of the night to help you find Midoriya, only to drag me to this alley and have me point you in the right direction. The dog hero puts up another finger. Then, when I tell you that it might be more difficult than that, you tell me that you will take it from there. Do you see why I'm a bit suspicious? Ectoplasm does not speak in his defense. So Hound Dog continues. What are you hiding from me? Ectoplasm briefly remains silent, but eventually he sighs and nods. The reason Midoriya went missing is because of me. I was supposed to be keeping an eye on him, watching him as he went to an office here, but I got distracted and my clone was taken out by the hero killer. Hound Dog's eyes widen, and his mouth curls into a growl. Why the hell didn't you tell me the hero killer is involved? Because, Ectoplasm grunted, I knew how you might react. Right now, the focus needs to be on finding Midoriya, not the hero killer. Rio was snarling now, hands open and claws extending. Please, Inui. Let's focus on one thing at a time. The hero killer will get what's coming to him someday, but for now I need you to put your personal feelings aside and help me. There's a long stretch of silence between the two of them, Hound Dog growling at Ectoplasm, who remained unfazed. Finally, Hound Dog's growl ended in a sharp bark as he took a deep breath, looking back up at Ectoplasm. I hate it when you're right. Ectoplasm sighs. Sometimes I do as well. The clone hero then leans back, away from the bloodstain, but Hound Dog is still looking at Ectoplasm with confusion. So, the dog hero snarls. You think this buildie is Izuku's? Ectoplasm nods, and Hound Dog crosses his arms. Well, what if it's the hero killer's? Ectoplasm shakes his head. No. It's unlikely that Midoriya was able to injure the hero killer in his state. It is far more likely that it is his. More likely, yes, Hound Dog agrees, but not proven. His arms remain crossed. I have never known you to be one to ignore possibilities. Ectoplasm, what has you so certain? Ectoplasm feels his mouth twist in frustration. Look, every second that we waste here is a second more that Izuku is out there, doing God knows what. So he stops, taking another breath. Just please tell me where the BLD leads, even if it leads to the hero killer. Hound Dog inquires. It doesn't dash again, Ectoplasm takes a deep breath and tries to continue, but Hound Dog interrupts. Doesn't what? Hound Dog prods. Doesn't matter. Ectoplasm doesn't answer, but his silence lets Hound Dog draw his own conclusion. It doesn't matter, does it? Ectoplasm stays silent, because no matter whose BLD it is, you think you'll find Izuku at the end of the trail, don't you? Izuku isn't a bad person, Ectoplasm declares. I didn't say that, Hound Dog rebuts. I said you think Izuku is with the hero killer right now. That's why you don't want me to chase the trail with you, isn't it? Ectoplasm, again, refuses to answer verbally, but his body language tells Hound Dog all he needs to know. The question now, Hound Dog walks over to Ectoplasm, standing next to him, is why do you think that? Ectoplasm tries to keep up the facade of indifference, but he sighs, letting his shoulders slump. I should have tried harder. Ectoplasm let out a shuddering breath. I tried to calm him down, to get him to listen. There is a pause before Ectoplasm continues. The things he said, they worried me. He was so angry, but at the same time, so scared. Scared? Hound Dog repeats. Of you. Of me, of heroes, of people, Ectoplasm turned fully to Hound Dog, facing him head-on. Midoriya is in a dark place. He feels like he can't trust anybody around him, and frankly, I can't blame him. Ectoplasm throws his arms into the air, pacing in a circle. When I saw his behavior in class and wanted to help, I failed. When I had a chance to prevent him from being assaulted by Aoi, I failed. And now, when I had a chance to convince him that I meant him no harm, that nobody here wants to hurt him, I failed again. Inui stayed silent, letting Ectoplasm speak. Every time I had an opportunity to help the boy, I failed. Why are you so convinced that Midoriya's pain is solely your fault? Hound Dog says, empathetically, there was no way you could have known about Aoi, and what happened in this alley was not something you could have realistically prevented. Ectoplasm seems to grow more reserved, his tone becoming more like the calm, muted voice that Inui had grown accustomed to. When I look at Midoriya, at his bandaged eye and his missing arm, at his mannerisms and actions, I can't help but see myself. The clone hero takes a deep breath. I lost my legs when I was well into adulthood. I came to terms with it, but it was a long road. But I am a hero, and I knew the risks going into it. I knew that this could happen, and I think that helped me accept that. But Ectoplasm's voice shudders. Izuku is just a boy, half my age when my accident happened, not to mention he's a civilian. Ectoplasm turns to Hound Dog. I know that feeling, the feeling of looking at the world and not being able to trust the smiles on people's faces. I know the maelstrom of anxiety that comes from those feelings, how paralyzing it can be. That's why nobody knows your name, isn't it? Inui inquires. Not even the other staff. Ectoplasm nods. To this day, I feel that fear. The fear that someday, soon everything around me will crumble. Just like it did when I lost my legs. Even though the clone hero's eyes are covered, Hound Dog notes that they seem to be focused in a faraway look. I see that fear in Izuku, and I want to help him, but now he's in the hands of that psycho, who's doing God knows what to him. You're worried that Midoriya may be swayed by the hero killer. Inui did not say it as a question, and Ectoplasm knew it wasn't. Izuku isn't a bad person, Ectoplasm declares once again. He's confused, angry, and scared. He needs help. Ectoplasm's fists are clenched, but he feels Inui pay a paw on his shoulder. Then we'll find him, Inui stated, firmly. We'll find him, and you can tell him all that yourself. Bakugo groaned as he worked the knots out of his lower back, his face frozen into a frustrated scowl. His back was stiff from sitting at his desk for hours while Aizawa barked bullshit at him. And when he got up, his legs felt like ice, with needles stabbing into every corner of his limbs. Several times, Bakugo found himself so bored that he found counting prime numbers in his head to be a far more entertaining activity. He looked up at the setting sun, pondering his last few days of lessons, if you could even call them that. Over the past 2 days, Bakugo had not done a single activity worth his time. It was always the same. He would show up at the school, Aizawa would lecture him on something pointless again, then he would go home and go to sleep. It was agonizing. Internships were a massive part of every alumni's story. They always spoke fondly of the invaluable experience they gained in such a short time, and everyone knew that having these internships would make you look better after graduation. Now, UA was robbing him of that experience. They were preventing him from his perfect story and holding him back from growing into the hero he was destined to be. He hadn't done anything wrong. Since his win in the sports festival, his hobo teacher had been treating him like SHD. Not to mention the F-rat who ran this joint had given the man carte blanche to ruin his life. It wasn't fair. He hadn't done anything to deserve this. But now, they were jailing him here like some sort of F-criminal. He wasn't allowed to leave campus until the end of the day. He was constantly being watched by either the hobo or another one of his co-conspirators. Hell, Aizawa had called the support company and revoked the use of his grenade gauntlets. This was supposed to be Bakugo's path to the top. He had planned it ever since he was 6 years old. Get into UA, win the sports festival all 3 years, intern with top heroes each year, graduate top of the class, and move on to his true destiny. But now it felt like every chance it had, the world was intent on trying to rip that from him and ruin his life. There were times Bakugo had contemplated ditching the internship and going home to sleep or do something else. It would probably be a better use of his time, at the very least. But he knew that would only make Aizawa come down on him harder. And as much as he was growing to hate the hobo, that would only make things worse. So unfortunately, Bakugo's only option right now is to just toe the line. No matter how much it pained him to do so, he climbed the flight of stairs to the train platform, rolling his shoulder to pop the joint, and checked his phone, noting the time of day. Walking to the familiar train platform, he got ready for the short ride home, trying his best to calm himself down and brace himself to do it all again the next day. However, Bakugo felt eyes on him and scanned the platform. The vast majority of people preparing for the end-of-day commute were minding their own business. However, he noticed several people scattered around the station, staring at him with complicated expressions. Bakugo's eyes flicked around at the people staring at him, feeling the tension from the day return to him in force. Glancing at their faces, he catches some familiar emotions. Some look at him with curiosity or shock, likely at seeing someone with some fame. Others seem to glare at him with suspicion, causing him to grit his teeth. But, for him, one emotion catches him the most off guard. Fear. Several people seem to look at him with concern, their anxiety clear in their eyes. It was almost like they were trying to best catalog his position in the station, keeping him within their peripherals and documenting his every motion. Like a wild animal, the roaring of the train and the battering of air snaps him from his introspection, and he tries to ignore the dark feeling in his chest as he boards the train. He moves to the corner of the train, sitting and crossing his arms, glaring at the floor of the train. He sees a few dozen other people pour in from the corner of his eyes, but tries to pay them no mind, huffing as the doors of the train close. However, with the bustling of the station muffled from the thick metal doors, he begins to hear the muted whispering of his fellow passengers. He turns his head to view the other train-goers, and as soon as his eyes meet them, the whispering stops. His jaw clenches, and his eyes narrow, but he simply scoffs, turning back to his original position and crossing his arms again. The periodic thumping of the train on its tracks overtakes the car for a time, no other sound daring to interrupt it. But soon, even that fades, as the whispering begins anew, and Bakugo tries to ignore it. But despite that, he finds himself bombarded by fragments of their whispers. The boy from the sports festival, right? Looks mad. Let's be careful. Bakugo's jaw quivers under the force of its clenching, his fist balled in his crossed arms, and he feels his anger bubbling up. His scarlet eyes blaze with an untapped frustration. Normally, he could ignore the chatter of extras like these, but the last few days had left him on a short fuse, and their gossip was only serving to add fuel to the fire. Bakugo could ignore praise. He could even ignore anger, but what he doesn't understand is why they are looking at him with fear. The extras on TV never look at heroes like that. Every time All Might came on screen, people looked at him with nothing but admiration and praise. The only people who felt fear were the villains. So why were they looking at him like that? I don't get it. What did I do? Bakugo's mind raced. Why are they looking at me like a mom look? A child's voice pipes up. It's the bad guy from TV. Bakugo's head snaps over to the voice, seeing a child standing on a seat, excitedly facing her mother. She wasn't even looking at him, but he noticed her hand. The arm was extended outward straight like a tree branch, and the hand was fixed into a point that was directed straight at him. Bakugo shot up from his seat, turning to face the child and her mother. "What did you say?" he roared, the child seeming to back away to her mom, curling in her side, eyes closed and clearly startled. The girl's mother encircled the child with her arms, and she looked at Bakugo with a combination of anger and fear. The train had gone silent, eyes now locked onto Bakugo, and he looked around, seeing everyone staring at him with that same emotion as the mother. Their brows were creased and narrow, eyes filled with trepidation and fear. Several people near the mother and child seemed tense, and he noticed several others pulling out their phones and beginning to record him. There were several moments of silence, nobody moving for a PRD. Bakugo was looking at everyone else in the train, feeling their eyes set on him like the weight of 1,000 worlds. It made his heart rate increase, but not in the normal mantra of rage, but in stilted palpitations of that same cold that he had been trying so desperately to ignore. Eventually, he unclenched his fists and slammed himself down into the seat once again. He took a breath, trying to calm the bubbling fury within, but the tension in the train car only seemed to grow. All chatter ceased for the rest of the ride, but he could feel the eyes of nearly every passenger on him, still staring at him with that same anger and fear. "Why?" he thinks. "Why won't they stop looking at me like that?" Kirishima nursed his bruises, wincing as he lifts the HRNSS from his chest and plops it down on the ground. He unfastens the jaw guard that he wears, massaging his jaw and noting the blooming of a large red bruise on the side, near where his cheek meets his chin. Looking down at his stomach and sides, he sees several large bruises there as well, and by the throbbing pain of his back, he is sure that his back is littered with welts and bruises, likely more than anywhere else. He feels a tap on his shoulder and turns to see Tetsu getting into his casual clothes. The steel quirk boy is looking at him with concern. "You okay, Kirishima?" The rock quirk boy sighs and nods. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a bit sore." Looking at that bruising, "I'd say you're more than a bit sore." Tetsu pokes a bruise on Kirishima's back, causing the redhead to wince and flinch away from his touch. "You look like you're turning into Grimace." "Gee, thanks," Kirishima deadpants. However, his disapproving expression melts away as he lets out a tired smile. "Even so, I feel like I'm getting better every day." The red-haired boy holds up a fist, nodding to himself. "Sure, grand kicks my but a lot dash. Try all the time." Tetsu chuckles, causing Kirishima to roll his eyes. But Kirishima continues, pointedly, "I feel like every time I step into that ring, I get a bit better each time." The redhead's smile becomes ecstatic, pointed teeth bared in a large grin. "I'm really learning a lot from him. I can see why he taught at UA." Tetsu huffs. "You must be nice." He slips his shirt over his head, groaning as he does so. Meanwhile, Fourth Kind is drilling me on how to properly make coffee. It's not fair. Kirishima rolls his eyes. "You are in the arena almost as much as I am." Tetsu. "The only difference between our internships is that Fourth Kind hits you less." "Oh yeah?" Tetsu gets up in his face, acting tough, but still smiling. "Want to prove that." Before Kirishima can answer his challenge, he feels a buzzing in his pocket. Looking down, he sees a call from Ishido. "Oh, sorry." Kirishima spins around. "I gotta take this." "Diamond." Tetsu taunts. "That's how you react when she calls. You must be whipped." Kirishima answers the call, holding up a middle finger to Tetsu as he does so. He tries to ignore the other boy's laughter as he picks up the line. "Hey, Mina." Kirishima greets. "How's it going?" "God, just shoot me." The pink girl replies. "I don't think I've been this sore in my life." "Yeah." Kirishima notes the bruises on his body. "I think I can relate. Besides that, is everything going well?" "I should be asking you that." Mina snarks. "I heard you got a surprise in your internship. Some old teacher came to train you personally." Kirishima briefly is stunned into silence, but replies, Yeah, how did you know about that?" "I didn't even know until I got here." Tetsu complained to Kendo. Who told Momo? Who told Uraraka? Who told me? Mina replies bluntly. Pretty sure the whole class knows now, if I'm being honest. Kirishima turns to glare at Tetsu, who seems confused. Oh, is that so? Yep. Mina chirps, but it probably got hyped up down the grapevine. I heard that he's a demon who beats you black and blue every time you step into the arena. I also heard he's a SDSD and can teleport. Kirishima feels his face drop. No, that's pretty spot on. He shakes his head, a smile returning to his face. But enough about me. How is your internship going? I heard you went with Yoroi Musha. Must be nice training with a top 10 hero. Instead of the excitement that Kirishima is used to, he finds Mina becomes a bit reserved, her voice losing its usual pep and becoming far more subdued. Yes, it's going well. Kirishima tries to gently prod for more information. Sounds like that may not be the case. Is there anything you want to talk about? Mina hesitates, but she replies, it's nothing. Just something I have to deal with, no big deal. Kirishima, however, is not convinced. Come on, Ishido. He takes a deep breath. I can tell that something is bothering you. So let's hear it. He hears silence on the other end for a PRD, and briefly wonders if he had pushed too strong. But before he could apologize, he hears her let out a deep breath. She begins, I went with Yoroi Musha to learn how to fight better, and I think I am. But he hears Mina let out a shuddering breath. There are times when we're sparring, and he comes rushing at me, and I just freeze. Kirishima doesn't respond, letting her continue. I don't know what it is, but when I see Yoroi rushing me, all I can see is Bakugo. Kirishima grits his teeth at the mention of their classmate, but takes a deep breath. Getting angry now wouldn't solve anything. Do you need someone to talk to? I don't know. Mina mutters, I shouldn't be letting him affect me like this. He isn't worth it, but I can't help it. It's like every time I fight now, I can't help but flinch and try to move away. She sighs, and Kirishima can hear the weight behind the act. I just feel so weak. No, Kirishima says, you aren't weak. Kirishima pauses, trying to collect his words properly. Just because you're scared doesn't make you weak. What Bakugo did to you was horrible, and you shouldn't feel bad about being scared of him. And being scared doesn't make you weak, okay? Mina doesn't reply at first, so Kirishima continues. Besides, but anyways, so who wouldn't be afraid of him? Immediately, Kirishima realizes his words came off as harsh, and tries to backtrack. Not that I'm downplaying what he did to you. It was awful. I'm just saying that he's a scary guy, not that you need anyone to tell you that. I'm gonna say Mina does not speak for a time, and Kirishima gets worried, but eventually, he hears a watery laugh from the other end of the phone. Jeez, Mina chuckles out. I don't know what it is with you. Sometimes you say the greatest things, and the next you're tripping over your words like it's a sport. Kirishima sighs in relief, and lets out a tired smile. Yeah, well, if it was, I'd probably be a finalist at least. Mina responded with a much heartier laugh, causing Kirishima to smile much more warmly from the end of his phone. Please, you be a gold medalist, easy. The two shared a laugh, simply relishing in having someone to talk to, before lulling into silence. Thanks, Kirishima, Mina said. I needed that. Anytime, Kirishima replied. He was startled when he heard the door to the locker room open, and looked over to see Gran Torino, glaring at him on his phone. I gotta go, Kirishima hastily informs. I think my mentor is about to kill me. He hears Mina question him, but he hangs up the phone, gulping as Torino approaches him. I've been sitting out here for half an hour, waiting for you to finish changing, and you've been sitting here talking to your girlfriend the whole time. Kirishima blushed, and Gran Torino stared up at him with a piercing glare. It's not like that. Kirishima blurts out, she's just my friend. She was just calling to Che Dash. I don't care. Torino snaps, causing Kirishima to immediately stop speaking. I need to talk with you. Tomorrow you're going on patrol with Roundhouse, right? Kirishima nods, immediately posture straight like a soldier. Gran Torino growls, bah fine. I'll let you have your fun. But the next day me and you are going on patrol. Torino grins, and we're going to be going to my home turf. Kirishima seems shocked, but nods. Yes, sir. He withers a bit. Oh, where is that, sir? Hosu, Torino replies impatiently. Usually pretty calm. Should be a good start for you. The elderly hero's eyes flick to his charge. You think you can handle it? Kirishima clenches a fist to his chest and nods. Yes, sir. I must say, Manuel remarked, I was not expecting you to take up my offer for an internship. The normal hero looks back at his charge, who stood ramrod straight next to him in full armor. Ida did not respond to Manuel meaningfully, merely supplying the hero with a small nod. The two walked around the streets of Hosu, patrolling the blocks close to Manuel's agency. It became clear to Tenya that Manuel was a man who knew most everyone around the area. Everywhere they went, several people referred to him casually, calling him Manuel or even shortening it to Mani. An older woman even walked up to Manuel and called him by first name, handing the man a baked good and patting the fin on the hero's head. Manuel seemed slightly embarrassed, but otherwise accepted the treat graciously, offering to split it with Tenya. However, Tenya found he wasn't focusing much on Manuel's activities. Instead, he finds himself glancing into every alley they walk past. If he finds nothing there, he looks up, checking the rooftops for any signs of blades or crimson clothes. Tenya was eyeing crowds, looking for unruly black hair or vile crimson eyes, in hopes of finding his quarry. But with every passing day, he finds himself growing more desperate. He feels a tap on his helmet and looks over to see Manuel looking at him with concern. You okay, Tenya? Ida turns his head away from the normal hero and nods. Yes, I apologize. I was lost in thought, that's all. Manuel gives Ida a complicated look, but continues their patrol. They were coming to the end of their route, returning to Manuel's agency, where Manuel opened the door with a small sigh of relief. Phew, another day, Manuel breathes out, removing his shoes at the door. I'm sorry that took so long. Mrs. Cochillo likes to chat a lot. Manuel takes off his helmet, letting his brown hair spill out, and Ida can't help but notice how fondly Manuel speaks of the woman. Yes, Ida replies, still not removing his gear. That was quite a long patrol. You were stopped multiple times by several people along the way. Yeah, sorry about that. Manuel capitulates. People tend to get very familiar with me here. But if it helps them feel safer, then I don't see much harm in it. Not like they have reason to feel safe, Tenya remarks in his head. Not with him on the loose. Manuel fixes Ida with another complicated look and simply takes in the boy's posture. However, after a time, he sighs and straightens out to meet the boy head-on. You know, Manuel continues, I wasn't sure how to bring this up out there, but I think I know why of all the offers you got, you chose me. Tenya freezes, but Manuel continues. I feel responsible to tell you that if you were planning to do what I think you are going to do, it is a very bad idea. Ida grit his teeth under his helmet, but Manuel continues. You are still unlicensed. If you do anything out there without my or another hero's express permission, you could get into some serious trouble. Ida. Manuel's warning only serves to grate on Tenya more, his posture quivering and his hands shaking with rage. The normal hero sees this and puts his hands up in surrender. That's part of the reason I wanted to take you on patrol today. I know that the news says that the hero killer is in Hosu, but I wanted to try and show you the area and the people in it. Ida does not say anything, but Manuel does not expect him to. Just keep in mind, Tenya, when you go off books like that, when you pick fights with bad people, it's not just you that you're involving, it's everyone around you as well. Other heroes and civilians too. Manuel looks down. I know that you're upset about what happened to your bro, the Dash. I think I am just going to go to sleep. Ida interrupts. I will see you in the morning. With that, the engine-quirked boy stomps off, leaving Manuel standing at the entrance of his agency alone. The normal hero looks at the shrinking figure of Tenya Ida and shakes his head. I'll need to keep an eye on him. I'm afraid he might get himself hurt. Or worse, yes, Hisashi shouted, pumping his fist into the air. Finally, it works. Staring down at the bench, Hisashi places a hand on the small device, lifting it up to examine it closer. He lifts his goggles off his face, squinting to note the carefully tooled brass threads of the compressed coil, and nods with confidence. Carefully, holding the delicate coil out in front of him, he moves over to the two long, rigid machines laid on their side. All right, Hisashi nods. If I'm right about this, and I usually am, this should make the compensator's effective force dilution triple. He carefully screws in the coil, fastening the brass in place using a spot welder. With a flick, the coil ejects to life, expanding to 4 times its original size and leaving a large spring in its place. Nodding, he carefully lifts up the device, holding it up and pressing the stock of the firearm into his shoulder. He aims the device at a makeshift target set up on the other side of the lab, a freshly painted slab of concrete about an inch thick connected to a heavy metal chain, hanging from the roof. He closes one eye, centering his vision to the iron sights of the device. With a squeeze of the trigger, he feels the gun rocket back into his shoulder, the spring fastened to the end of the stock absorbing nearly all the force, and a long metal rod ejected out of the front of the gun. The metal object impacts with the concrete wall, piercing through the rigid off-stone of the block, and ejecting out the other side, where 3 prongs then unfurl from the tip of the rod. The line connected to the rod goes taut, and the prongs catch on the rear of the slab, holding it in place. Hisashi tests the strength of the line, tugging the gun experimentally before nodding and pressing a button fitted to the side of the gun. The prongs then expand into the concrete, anchoring themselves within the solid wall even further. The support tech then presses a button, letting a winch carry the concrete slab up to the roof of the garage. Once the slab is secured above Hisashi, he then presses another button on the grapple, causing the cord to begin to reel in. The cord goes taut again, and with a deep breath, Hisashi lets the cord pull him up to the ceiling. His feet leave the ground and leaves him dangling from the roof of his garage. With an excited chuckle, Hisashi then takes a deep breath and begins to pull on the grapple, violently swinging himself from side to side, and then finally turning himself upside down and planting his feet into the concrete slab. With his footing set, he begins to pull the cord with all his might, straining against the inexorable grip of the machine. However, no matter how Hisashi shifts and pulls, the grapple remains in place, holding the support technician in the air, suspended above his garage floor, laughing in the face of gravity. With the test successful, Hisashi releases another jubilant chuckle, flipping himself around with a groan, and lowering himself to the ground once again. Pressing a few more keys, the prongs retract from the concrete, and finally back into the barrel of the grappling rifle. Hisashi looks back down at his creation and smiles before moving over to his computer and pressing a few keys, beginning a call through the computer. A few rings pass before a brightly dressed man with an eye-catching electric blue mask appears. The mask itself is boisterous, with orange and silver highlights. But what is the most eye-catching thing to Hisashi is the man's eyes, which are yellow, with small, round pupils that classify better as pinpricks. "Ah, Hisashi," the man belts out. "Good to hear from you, my friend." "Hello, Aguila," Hisashi greets. "I just wanted to show you the device that I came up with." The support tech lifts the grapple rifle up to the camera, showing it off to the lookador hero, whose eyes begin to scan over the device. "I came up with a high-powered grapple design that can hold itself in place even if your full body weight is applied to it, and I think it will work perfectly." The lookador hero listens to Hisashi's words, but there is some clear hesitation in his eyes. He begins to rub the back of his neck. "Ah, I see." Hisashi notices the man's hesitation and puts the grapple down. "Is there a problem, Aguila?" "It's just," Aguila tries to find the best way to speak his mind in this situation. "You know that I trust your judgment, Hisashi. You've done right by me in the past." The hero is placating, which causes Hisashi to furrow his eyebrows. "But don't you think it's a bit bland?" "Bland," Hisashi repeats, and the lookador hero puts his arms up in defense. "I'm not saying I don't like it," the hero bargains. "It's just my brand is flash pizzazz, you know?" Aguila sighs. "I don't know, when I asked for something to help me soar above the villains, that isn't exactly what I meant. I was more thinking jetpack or wingsuit." "Well," Hisashi rubs his temple, "if you were a hero like Airjet or Slipstream, I would agree with you. They operate in much more open environments, streets, and aerial engagement." Aguila looks like he wants to interrupt, but Hisashi holds up a hand. "You, however, fight in close quarters. The vast majority of engagements that you ever get involved in are in hallways, lobbies, and subway tunnels. In those situations, do you know what would happen if you used a jetpack?" Aguila seems to be embarrassed. Look, I'm not trying to question your judging dash. Do you know what happened? Hisashi repeats, causing the now scolded hero to sigh, similar to a child after receiving a reprimand from their parent. I would hit a wall, Aguila groans. You would hit a wall, Hisashi confirms, once again holding up the grapple rifle. This is only version 1. In later iterations, I would like to come up with a slimmer, wrist and waist-mounted design, one that interferes less with your acrobatic fighting style. But for now, this should fulfill the role. But Aguila tries to complain, it's just so simple. Yes, Hisashi nods. It is, but the funny thing about simple tools, they often are the ones that are the most effective. He turns back to the camera, his eyes resolute as he stares back at the hero. I promise you, if you give it a chance, you'll find that this piece of support gear is far more useful than any jetpack or wingsuit. The support tech smirks. Who knows, maybe you'll even come to like it. The Lookador hero still seems hesitant, but Hisashi can see his denial cracking. With a sigh, he looks down at the grapple gun. Or I could just not give it to you if you really do hate it so much. Gah, Aguila groans. Fine, I'll give it a shot. Hisashi smiles at the hero. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. The call ends, and Hisashi looks down at the grapple gun one more time, before nodding and setting it on the bench, moving on to his next project. He is so engrossed in his work, he doesn't see the pair of green eyes and small hands peeking out from a crack in the workshop door, having heard everything that his father had said. Izuku is shaken awake by the feeling of a foot impacting lightly with his rib. He coughs, groaning as he lifts himself up on his only flesh arm, staring up at the familiar figure of the hero killer, who is handing him something wrapped in tinfoil. Taking the foil-wrapped item, Izuku opens it, and is met with a stale, cold bagel. He cringes a bit at the sight of the strong bagel, but Stain rolls his eyes at the boy. Don't exactly have Michelin-tier cooking supplies here, kid. The hero killer drawls. If you won't eat it, I'll be happy to take that off your hands. Izuku's stomach gurgles at the worst possible time, causing the boy to cover his gut with his one remaining arm. Looking down at the stale bagel once again, he hesitates only a moment longer before beginning to eat the offered breakfast item. The hero killer nods at him. Good, feel free to eat, but focus when I'm talking, got it? Stain's eyes narrow at the still bandaged boy. I won't be repeating myself. Izuku nods, greedily devouring the strong bagel in his hands. His teeth briefly catch on the almost stone-like texture of the bread, but he keeps chewing, greedily consuming the first real food he had eaten in days, besides hospital food. Stain nods, moving over to the corner of their makeshift home, and leaning against the wall of their only sanctuary. Let me be very clear with you right now. I am not one to make exceptions in the pursuit of my goals. Stain speaks frankly, and Izuku finds himself staring back at the hero killer with his one good eye. I am not going to slow down for you, nor will I take things easy on you just because you don't have an arm. I expect you to keep up of your own will, otherwise you're wasting my time. Izuku doesn't hesitate, nodding at Stain, who smiles back at him. That being said, I believe I should start with a story. Stain's eyes grow glassy, the moment that I realize that heroes do not exist. Izuku felt his stomach drop, holding on to Stain's every word. It was late into my high school years. I was young and naive. Our teachers had filled our heads with lies, telling us that the only thing worth being is a hero. The villain chuckled. They would even go as far as to tell us, hero or nothing. Izuku felt his stomach boil at that, the familiarity of the words ringing true in his head. When graduation rolled around, I would hear whispers of my classmates, talking about how they would become heroes, how much money and fame they would inherit from the title. The hero killer's large mouth twisted into a snarl. It sickened me, even then. But I tricked myself into thinking that the world would weed out the bad naturally. After all, heroes are the best of us, right? Stain let out a bitter chuckle, one that resonated in Izuku's soul like a tuning fork matching a frequency. What a joke, Stain spat. One by one, I saw those selfish glory seekers enter hero school after hero school, wearing flashy costumes and posing for cameras like it's some kind of fashion show. Stain's fists had clenched, but Izuku still felt his attention locked firmly on the hero killer. I tried to explain to people, to talk to them about the real meaning of a hero. Stain shook his head. A hero is meant to be a protector, a defender of the innocent, not some kind of pastel-coated celebrity. But nobody listened. Izuku saw the hero killer's already dark eyes darken even further. No, it was more than that. They didn't just ignore me. They reviled me. They said I was just jealous that I hadn't gotten into a hero school, even though I didn't even want to be a hero. They wrote off my words as the ramblings of an envious nobody and moved on, praising their new false gods like zealots. I remember a face from that time. Stain's eyes flick up to Izuku for the first time since his speech began. I knew him as a former classmate. He was a cocky kid with this ever-present smug grin on his face, like the world owed him something. But you probably remember him as the title hero, Crest. Izuku's eyes widened, nodding to the hero killer. Yeah, Izuku affirmed. He's a former top 10. Had a powerful water quirk that let him control ocean tides, right? Stain nodded, confirming Izuku's assertion. Yes, Stain said. That is how most people know him. The hero killer's face twists into a scowl. What they don't know is his habit of picking up high school girls for get-togethers. Stain spits the last word out like poison in his mouth, and Izuku feels himself shudder at that, trying his best to not think about what get-togethers actually meant. I saw him one night, dragging a young girl into a car. Stain grit his teeth and clenched his fists. She couldn't have been older than 13, and she looked scared, but the worst part wasn't the fear, it was the confusion in her eyes. The hero killer slammed his fist into the side of the water tower, causing a sharp metallic thunk to ring out. I could see it plain as day on her face. She couldn't believe what was happening to her. She didn't understand why this hero, this fake, would do this to her. She didn't want to believe what would happen if she entered that car. I tried to follow them, and eventually I found the car, parked in a lot next to a hotel. Izuku shivered, feeling his stomach drop. I walked into the lobby, searching the halls, and found Crust leaving a room, with that same smug F grin on his face. Stain's clenched fists quivered. I confronted him. I told him I would tell everyone. And do you know what that monster did? Stain's eyes shot down, at the floor of the water tower, his eyes locked onto the thin metal floor. He laughed. The hero killer stated simply. He laughed and told me to go ahead. Stain's eyes shot up, meeting Izuku's. He said, nobody will believe you. And even if they do, the commission will shut them up. There's nothing you can do, so just give up and move on. Izuku felt those words stab him like a knife. His mind started reeling. Because the truth is, Deku, you never stood a chance. You were done before you even started. And you know what? Stain's sneer grew. He was right. Izuku lowered his head, taking in the man's words. I tried to tell people, but they wouldn't listen to me. They all said I was crazy, that a hero would never do such a thing. Some even said I was simply a jealous man, who wished I was as successful as the number 6 hero. Stain lifted his hands to the sky, as if speaking directly to God himself, and the ones that did listen. I found they were not as quick to listen the next time. He turns to Izuku. I don't think it takes a genius to wonder why. Stain lowered his hands to his sides, his eyes still manic and glassy. I found out later who the girl was through a news report. Sayasuyama, right next to her obituary. Izuku felt his BLD freeze, but the hero killer pressed on. This world pushed this girl to the edge. It's strong for me to blame her for stepping off the side. Stain lamented, looking back up at Izuku. That was the moment where the gilded facade of this world melted away, and I began to see the rot underneath for the first time. Stain took a deep breath, his eyes sharpening like blades. I realized then that words are useless, that despite my efforts, nobody would ever listen to me. Stain then gripped the knife at his belt. So I decided, right then and there, that if the whole world is so intent on ignoring the rot until it consumes them, then I would cut it out myself. Stain's mouth twisted into a sickening grin, and I started my mission where it all began, staring down at Crest, blade pressed to his neck, tendons cut and bleeding on the ground, smug grin nowhere in sight. The hero killer seemed to be relishing the memory of his virgin kill, causing Izuku's spine to shiver. Hearing that monster, that stain of a man, beg for his life, bargained for me to give him another chance before running my blade through his throat, I will never forget that feeling for as long as I live. That feeling, The knowledge that I am carving the sickening rot out of this world one bloodstain at a time. That gives me purpose. That is my mission. With that, Stain returns to the present, straightening out and reaching down to Izuku. I can see that same drive in your eye, Stain affirms. I see purpose, an inferno of determination to see a better world, no matter the cost, buried deep within. The hero killer runs a hand over Izuku's eyelid, opening his one green orb. I will help you cultivate that fire, bend it into something that can be used for a higher purpose, a higher mission. Stain listed himself from Izuku, turning to a board at the far side of their shanty home. And we start tomorrow with him. Stain points to a photo on the wall, a knife already embedded in it. The man in the photo has shoulder-length black hair and eyes with narrowed, small pupils. His lower eyelid was marked with 2 red lines on either side, and he wore a striped green and red headband on his forehead with a feather sticking out of one side. Izuku recognized the hero in the photo and spoke his name. Native. The sound of metal creaking against metal, gears clicking loudly as the joints of the hulking machine loomed over her. Momo was pinned to the ground, her breathing rapidly chopping out in short, hasty gasps of air. She stared up at the figure above her, the featureless metal mask staring back down at her. She couldn't think, she could hardly move. Instead, she was paralyzed, stuck in place as if rooted by an unknown gravity, keeping her from escaping the monster above her. What I could have done with a quirk like that, and it's wasted on someone like you. The metal behemoth's voice rumbles out, warped through the faceplate and amplified through unknown means. Momo feels the voice pierce through her with the force of Gungnir, a spear impaling her soul and corrupting the once warm life within her, and filling her with an inescapable cold, slowly suffocating her. Momo tries desperately to deny his stance, to tell him that he's wrong about her, but she can't even begin to mount a defense. After all, it's her lying on the ground, defeated, with him looming above her. The metal monster lifts his fist. Above Momo's head, the sound of metal scraping echoed through her head. She sees sparks fly behind the fist, a large metal rod shooting out past the behemoth's elbow. She stares up at the cold, unfeeling eyes, begging in her mind for mercy upon all else. But with the groaning of metal and the fist rocketing down to her face, she knew there would be no mercy for her. She couldn't even close her eyes as the hammer impacted her head, this time with no shield to block him. She gasps, shooting up from her cot, sweat drenching her body as her eyes flick wildly around the room, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Noting the still dark walls of her and Kendo's shared bunk room, she started the process of calming her breathing. She took greedy gulps of air, expanding her lungs to capacity, holding her breath and exhaling. Eventually, after what could have been minutes or hours, Momo managed to calm her breathing enough to realize she was safe, that she was still breathing. Getting control of herself and wiping the sweat from her brow, Momo looked over to the clock on her banister, noting the still dark skyline outside. She takes in the glowing digits on the screen and flops back in her cot with a loud groan. For in the morning, I should try and get back to sleep. The very thought of returning to her dreams causes dread to fill her stomach, the visage of the hulking metal monstrosity looming over her, like death over all of humanity, left Momo simply staring at the ceiling, unable to return to her slumber. She should be used to this by now. This same nightmare had been plaguing her nightly ritual for almost 2 weeks now. Every night he haunts her mind, a specter bearing down on her with a vengeance and wrath that Yaoyorozu had yet to experience in her life. Every night she relives the fight, knowing what happens next but being unable to do anything to prevent it. Even with knowledge of the future, she can't stop his assault. Then, when he has her pinned, the events begin to change. She knows deep down that the quirkless boy had tossed her out of bounds to win, but her mind insists on tormenting her with glimpses of alternate realities. Sometimes from their position, he delivers a strike to her face. Other times, he lights his pilot light and releases a bout of flame. The most terrifying ones, though, are the ones where he opens his left palm. The blue glow of the repulsor fitted to the gauntlet glowed with an intense heat. She could feel the sizzling of the air in front of her as it superheats, before he fires a blast, causing her world to turn dark. The wealthy girl checks her phone, laying on the same banister, to see if there is anything waiting for her, though not expecting much. However, when she observes the device, she finds herself surprised to see a message from her mother waiting for you. Remember what we talked about, dear? Momo feels herself tense at those 6 words, her mind carrying her back to the day after the sports festival. Momo tensely stepped out of the car, letting the driver close the door behind her, and began the short walk to the door of her lavish home. The mahogany portal was opened for her by a butler, revealing the familiar gilded interior of the only home she had ever known. The sloping, bifurcated staircases framed the main hall of the mansion, a large doorway that seemingly always remained open. The crystal chandelier above her head lit her path. Looking up the staircases, the heiress briefly considers climbing the sloping steps to the 2nd floor and walking straight to her room. Her mind is still clouded by the events of the day, and her final match in the competition was tormenting her with every action of her synapses. But she knows that if she puts this off, then it will only serve to make her and her parents more upset. Her parents were thoroughly stressed already as a consequence of their positions, and Momo dreading being the cause of even more for them. With a deep breath, she walks into the great hall and is greeted by a maid who bows at her arrival. "Pleasure to see you, ma'am." The maid's tone is practiced and poised. "Your mother is currently in her study. She wishes to speak with you as soon as you have time." Momo nods. She knows that "as soon as you have time" means immediately, so she wastes no time navigating the winding halls of the Yaoyorozu mansion. She climbs the spiral staircase marking the easternmost turret of the mansion, knowing that at the top of this, her mother's office lies in wait. Her steps are soft and practiced. She had been drilled on how to properly walk and talk for years, and she knew that faltering on that training now would only serve to send a bad impression. No matter how she felt, she knew she could not slouch. She straightened her back, kept her gaze forward, and reached the top of the staircase. The office was a massive, circular room with several large floor-to-ceiling windows, letting in a significant amount of natural light. Fitted across the office are shelves full of awards and framed pictures of her parents with different high-influence figures, shaking hands with presidents and posing with models. There are even several where her parents are seen smiling next to top 10 heroes of past and present. Hanging from the walls are dozens upon dozens of certificates, ranging from degrees to awards for one of the various corporations her mother owned and operated. Momo had seen them hundreds of times over the course of her life, but every time she walked into the room, the walls seemed to occupy even more of these framed markings of success, like a lichen spreading across an old building. Ahead of her, Momo sees a woman with long, smooth black hair running down her back, dressed immaculately in a perfectly fitted ebony black dress that almost seemed to absorb the light around her, making the woman seem almost ethereal. Momo stood rigid, clicking her heels together and fixing her posture to the best of her ability, before delivering a bow to her mother, who had yet to turn around. Her back arched down 90 degrees, and her eyes stared down at her boots, before Momo began to speak. "Good afternoon, Mother," she says. "I understand you wish to speak with me." Her mother finally turns around, acknowledging Momo's presence physically for the first time. Momo did not look up yet. She had not been given permission, but rather, she could feel her mother's intense onyx eyes gazing down at her from the older woman's timeless features. Her immaculately painted mouth was likely drawn into an impassive poker face. Momo could see the ends of her mother's dress, ending just below her ankle, where a pair of black LTHR stiletto heels were wrapped around her mother's feet. Despite the unwieldy shoes, Hayami Yaozu strutted over to her daughter with ease, stopping just in front of the girl. Momo takes the signal to straighten her back, meeting her mother's piercing gaze directly for the first time. She remains silent, however, letting her mother lead their conversation. "Yes, dear," her mother starts, her voice expelling from her mouth in a smooth, silky tone. "I believe we need to have a chat about your future." Momo hides it well, but she feels her heartbeat begin to pick up. Still, she doesn't argue with Hayami, who takes a step back from her daughter. I've been keeping track of the aftermath of that match, her mother's voice doesn't change perceptibly, but Momo can hear the slight twinge of irritation as Hayami speaks of the fight. Luckily, the vast majority of the public are focused more on the finale of the festival, and not on your match. The older woman nods. So, you've avoided a PR nightmare by a hair. You got lucky. Momo lets out a breath she had been holding for a while, though her posture does not change in the slightest. She merely nods sharply at her mother, nearly militaristically in DSPLN, and waits for the woman to speak. That being said, Hayami speaks, it would be impossible for me to ignore this glaring flaw in your image. So we will be making an effort to bury any conversation that may arise from these events. Hayami's eyes narrow a fraction. In exchange, I expect you to make an effort to improve yourself and avoid a repeat of these events. Am I understood? Yes, ma'am, Momo says automatically. She knows better than to argue with her mother, given the efforts they had gone through to cultivate her image for her. Besides, it isn't like Momo disagreed with what her mother said. Meanwhile, Hayami spoke, her mouth dipping into a slight frown. I will be having a chat with your school about why that thing was even allowed to participate. The woman shakes her head. Honestly, U8 claims to be the best hero school in the country, and it had better be given what strings we pulled to get you in. Yet they allow defects like that to not only enroll, but participate in public events. Hayami's poise never left her, but Momo had gotten good at detecting when her mother was angry. Right now, the woman was livid. I can understand optics. It always looks good to seem more tolerant. Hayami seems to spit the word out, but honestly, there are limits to how much the public's belief can be suspended. Do people actually think that it built such an advanced piece of machinery? Hayami's face broke into a grim smile. It's almost laughable, the thought of it. Momo did not speak, merely nodding along with her mother, taking in the woman's words. A large part of her held on to every word, finding comfort in the idea that her opponent had not been capable of such a feat. However, a smaller, buried part of her can't help but question that truth. I have taken the liberty of reaching out to several ranking heroes to offer you to them for an internship, her mother states, though the knowledge of that makes Momo's heart sink. Of course, she knew her mother was just ensuring her success, but the notion that she had been offered for the internships, not the other way around, it stings. A few of the agencies have reached out back. I believe that Iwabumi's offer is acceptable. The mother turned to her daughter, who stared diligently ahead. You will take her offer. Iwabumi is sure to put your image out there, which benefits us in the long term. The heiress nodded, and her mother waved her off. The girl immediately turned around, walking poised to the spiral stairs, only for her mother to stop her. Oh, and dear. Momo stopped, turning back around to her mother. You will be taking more lessons on proper posture. It is clear that you are lacking in that area. With a final turn, Hayami waved her daughter off, ignoring the stab of shock and hurt that crossed the girl's face. Momo said nothing though. Her mother had spoken, and so she would obey. Momo let out a sigh, lifting herself from her cot and stepping away from her soft cocoon. Carefully, she tiptoes to the closet, grabbing her hero costume, and skulks towards the showers. If she can't get a sleep, she may as well start the day early. And she should start by cleaning herself of the sweat from her turmoil. Entering the bathroom, she quickly trotted over to one of the showers and turned the water on. Leaning against the wall of the stall, she sighs to herself, waiting for the water to heat, when she catches sight of her visage staring back at her. She approaches the mirror, taking in her reflection as she thinks more about her parents' words. Iwabumi less of a hero and more of a model. She is found doing photo shoots and going to red carpet events far more often than she ever does patrols. In truth, Momo finds the idea of heroes like Iwabumi to be a bit shallow. But she notes that she isn't any better. After all, the whole reason she is at UA is to boost her image. Her parents made it clear this was a great step for her, and that the opportunity is one that will pay off in dividends for the corporation. Heroes are public figures, and time in the public, I will be sure to draw attention to her. Attaching a hero brand to her family's products would be an excellent business move for her and her family. That's what she kept telling herself, at least. She takes in her reflection as she feels the steam of the shower rising from the stall. The normally poised girl is slouching, normally perfect complexion marred with heavy dark bags under her eyes. Her skin has subtle blemishes that would normally be unacceptable, but as of recently, she had been unable to correct them. If her mother could see her, she would have a heart attack. With a sigh, Momo watches as the mirror begins to fog, obscuring her features slowly, and she shakes her head at her lamenting, nodding to her blurry reflection. She has no reason to lament over her motivations for being a hero. Her parents had a plan, one that would ensure her success when she inevitably takes over the Yaoyorozu conglomerate. She would do what is best for her parents. After all, her parents only wanted what was best for her. Nezu adjusted his tie again, perfectly centering the fabric strip perpendicular with his head. He scanned over his visage in the mirror, looking over his less-than-human figure, crammed into a custom suit to fit his need. The black coat and pants were paired with gloss black shoes. Looking closer to the shoes, he couldn't help but note the flaws in their design. The shoes had been tailored so that despite his radish feet, the shoes would create the visage of somewhat human feet. Nezu had always found that one of the hardest obstacles for him to overcome an image is that his clothes had never fit him right. It wasn't until he was able to order custom-tailored clothing that he had found a way to leap past these hurdles. However, despite looking immaculate as always, he couldn't help but feel unnatural in the garments. Looking at himself, a stoat, wearing a suit and tie, it never failed to fill his mind with a twinge of discomfort. He knew it was simply his mind playing tricks on him. But if only self-awareness was a cure for insecurity. Subtly, he extended his toes within the shoes, feeling the walls of the LTHR footwear press in on his feet. The inner shoe had been shaped to force his feet into a more anthropomorphized position, which in turn caused the knuckles of his feet to ache, locked in a slight arch within the leather-bound prisons. Still, he would endure. Every bit of his image needed to be perfect right now. A bit of discomfort was simply the price he would pay to further his goals on this day. Without further ado, an unseen man calls out, "Please welcome to the stage, the principal of UA, Nezu." There is a roar of applause, and Nezu takes a deep breath, plastering his famous reserved smile onto his face, designed so that his lips work to cover his fangs, even if he talks. He turns from the mirror, riding his feet once again, and steps out from behind the curtain, being greeted by a raucous wave of sound from an enthusiastic audience. Though, noting the massive neon applause sign hanging just out of camera shot, Nezu wonders how enthusiastic they really are. Nezu steps up a small step stool they provided to him, doing his best to remain as poised as he had before turning on the stool and sitting down in the padded, elevated seat. The host of the show, a man with an even faker smile than him, walks up to Nezu and shakes his hand, being sure to pose for several glamour shots along the way. Nezu fights the urge to roll his eyes, though he does laugh internally at his own hypocrisy. The host sits down, and the short stint of peppy music fades, taking the audience's applause with it. Nezu sees the host turn to him, his face still plastered with a wide, porcelain smile, and nods to the man. "Now," the host starts, "I feel that we need to address an elephant in the room, sir." The host pauses, though it is clear to Nezu the pause is more theatrical than analytical. "In your near decade of serving as principal for UA, not once have you ever agreed to come onto any news channel or talk show for an interview." Nezu nods, and the host continues, "So, I must ask you, why here and why now?" "I suppose that is a fair question," Nezu concedes. "It is certainly quite odd to the unaware, but I feel to the majority of people with context, the truth becomes quite clear." The sports festival. The host answers Nezu's unasked question, and the chimera nods, confirming the talking head's suspicion. "Yes," Nezu agrees. In truth, the aftermath of the sports festival has left many questions unanswered, and has left room for speculation. Nezu sits up straighter. "I intend to clear up as much as I can today, in an effort to quell the rumor mill, so to speak." "Well," the host adjusts some papers on his desk, straightening them out with several small taps. "I am sure most would appreciate a bit of illumination on that end." With that, the host turns fully to the diminutive rodent in the other seat. "Let us start off somewhat light, Midoriya." There's been a lot of speculation as to why he didn't use that mechanical suit that he wore for the entirety of the festival during the final. Nezu nods, though inwardly his mind begins to spin, thinking up the answers to questions that have yet to be spoken. Some speculate that the suit broke after his bout with Shoto Todoroki, while others think it may have been a situation of misplaced pride, believing that he didn't need the suit to win. Nezu can't help but bristle slightly at the two options presented. The insinuation is clear. Either Midoriya was incompetent, and his suit failed when he needed it, or he was arrogant, and therefore partly at fault for what happened. He hates how easily he anticipated that spin. I can actually speak definitively on this subject. Nezu muses. Reviewing the footage of the locker room, we found evidence of tampering performed on Midoriya's suit between the semifinals and the final, while Midoriya was visiting an injured student in the infirmary. Was the latter part of that sentence necessary? No, but it certainly served his narrative. So wait, the host supplies, you believe there was foul play? No, Nezu leans in. I confirmed there was foul play. The stoat pauses briefly, hearing some muttering from the live studio audience. Unfortunately, I cannot give specifics, as there is a pending investigation, but I will say that this happenstance came as a shock to all of the staff. Does this investigation have anything to do with the recent suspension of hero Vlad King? Nezu frowns, but inwardly he is giggling. This host will happily voice every insinuation he makes. He knew this was a great idea. Like I said, I cannot confirm or deny that. Not that he needs to, Nezu muses, but I can confirm that the investigation is ongoing, as both an internal affairs team and the police investigate the tampering thoroughly. I understand. The host nods, though I do have to wonder. Do you believe that this tampering invalidates the results of the finale? Oh, absolutely, Nezu nods. In fact, we are already in the process of informing the podium members that the results of the festival have been called into question and are revoking any titles given by their positions. Nezu sighs and shakes his head in a pantomime of disappointment. There is no way to know how much foul play was performed. A lie? Or by who? Another lie, but I am sure that those of our students who placed high in this tournament will be most distraught. Speaking of, I suppose we should get this out of the way. Katsuki Bakugo? Nezu nodded, anticipating this question. Many people are confused about his status as a student in UA. I have seen several debates personally about what should become of him. Can you offer us any insight into UA's stance on that? First, Nezu begins. Let me ask you a question, sir. The host seems a bit surprised, but otherwise does not object. What do you believe should happen to Bakugo? Nezu sees the host's eyes widen a slight bit, but the man seems to shrug off his surprise adeptly and moves carefully into answering. Well, frankly, I'm not sure if I am the person to be asking that. The host admits, sheepishly, beyond the talk show, I am just an ordinary person, like everyone in the audience. The host flashes the audience with a sharp smile and is met with cheers from some. Nezu fights the urge to GG at the blatant pandering. Ah, Nezu interjects, raising a paw. But that is exactly why I asked you. The host fails to mask his confusion this time, and Nezu relishes in catching the man off guard. Let me ask you this. What is the purpose of a hero? The host seems to think strong about his answer. Well, the purpose of a hero is to protect the public, correct? Exactly, Nezu confirms. So, I believe that it is important to explore the perspective of the layman, especially in the affairs of future heroes, as those same heroes will be responsible for the protection of the ordinary man, as you put it. Don't you agree? The host is now well and truly stunned, and Nezu savors the stunned silence for a moment more than is strictly necessary. So, the rodent continues. I'll ask again. What do you believe should happen to Bakugo? The host takes a moment to consider his words carefully. He looks at the cameras and then back to Nezu before sighing to himself. Well, if I were to be honest, I find Bakugo's conduct off-putting. The man admits this hesitantly, and Nezu can almost hear his trepidation at such a potentially controversial opinion. I don't know to what extent the boy should be punished, but I know there are many people out there who want him to be punished in some way. With that, the host seems to find his stride again. That being said, I believe you may be able to offer some insight into any updates on that. Don't you agree? Nezu nods again. Yes, well, the situation is far more complicated than I think a lot of people realize. Nezu leans forward, resting his hands in his lap. I do not think it's a stretch to call Bakugo's conduct in the sports festival unacceptable, and under normal circumstances, his actions would have likely been grounds for immediate expulsion. I'm hearing a but. The host surmises and Nezu nods again. You would be correct, the rodent affirms. In truth, there have been several factors influencing the decision to keep Bakugo enrolled, several of which are external but no less impactful. What exactly are you trying to say, Principal Nezu? The host prods. Nezu sighs theatrically, shrugging his shoulders with a pantomime of extraneous effort. The best that I am legally allowed to say is that Bakugo's talents, while raw, have yet to be tempered properly. The rodent smiles, trying to portray a dim sense of ignorance. There are even those in the Hero Commission that believe that he has potential as the next symbol of peace. There was a loud gasp in the audience, and several people began to mutter to himself. Nezu feigns trepidation, plastering a concerned expression on his face. But inwardly, he is relishing this moment. The fatal flaw of the Hero Commission is they believe that the public are stupid and lazy. Nezu, however, subscribes to a more interesting philosophy. The public are not stupid. Lazy. Yes. But they aren't stupid, merely blind. All you have to do is know where to prod, and they all open their eyes and sink. I'm sorry, the host begins. Are you insinuating that the Hero Commission are propping Bakugo up? Oh dear. Nezu tries to act disappointed, aiming that act at himself. I believe I have spoken out of turn. The rodent stands, picking the lapel microphone off of his vest. I apologize, but I believe it would be best to stop this interview here. Nezu ignores the uproar of the crowd, several people standing up, demanding answers, and turns, disappearing behind the curtain, leaving the host to try and cover for Nezu's blunder. Hearing the squawking of the crowd, the sounds of anger and confusion, Nezu finds his smile widened, baring his fangs to the world from the privacy of behind a curtain. He loves it when a plan comes together. Native yawned to himself, stretching his arms out above his head, trying to quell the aching of his spinal columns. He saw a few civilians wave to him cordially, recognizing him as a hero, but seeming unfamiliar outside of that. He ignored the slight disappointment in his gut and waved back to them, offering the people reassuring smiles. Yes, maybe he wasn't the most well-known hero, but surely that would change with time, right? He had only been a pro for 3 years now. Surely with more experience, he would be able to make the top 100. But in order for that to happen, he would need his big break, which unfortunately was unlikely so long as he patrolled Hosu. Truth is, when he had been offered a fully salaried hero position in Hosu, he had been ecstatic, paid far better than his former psychic salary, and had a far greater amount of autonomy. He had rationalized with himself that would allow him to get his name out far easier, as he would have more time to do solo patrols and fight villains at center stage. Hosu even had a fairly low hero concentration, so he figured that would be a massive advantage for him. What he had forgotten to consider was the reason why Hosu doesn't have a lot of heroes. Simply put, there isn't any need. Hosu has a very low crime rate, and any crime that does occur is usually petty theft or assault, never anything that would be considered villain tier crimes. And frankly, why would there be any villains here? Hosu doesn't have anything that would be worth a large-scale theft when compared with the risk. Sure, Hosu doesn't have high-ranking heroes around, but there are several high-rank agencies stationed within a few minutes of Hosu, making the place a crime-dead zone by consequence. As such, most of Native's patrols were dead. Just him walking around the city, saying hi to people, stopping at one of his favorite sandwich shops for lunch, and then punctuating it with more walking. A part of him knows that complaining about how easy and boring his job is a privilege. And really, he should probably be happy there isn't much crime for him to stop. Less crime means less people getting hurt. But a larger part can't help but wonder if patrolling in Hosu is a waste of his talents. He had graduated 5th in his class at Ketsubutsu, with several extracurricular activities to his name. Surely, he deserved a more glamorous position, right? At least better than grunt work like this. He walks past the familiar office building, marking the southwestern corner of his patrol route, and turns a corner, crossing over to continue the route. While the hero tries to keep himself positive, at least outwardly, he finds the monotony of his routine weighing on him. The faces of the crowd blend together as they wave to him, losing all semblance of individuality as they greet the stagnant pro-hero. He waves back to them, turning the familiar corner into a far less populated sidewalk. He barely saw anyone on the path, allowing him to finally drop his facade of happiness. Now, he wore his tired frown plainly, letting his expression speak for itself. He let out a loud sigh, allowing the shadows of the buildings to drown him in shade provided by the setting sun. That is when he heard the noise. It was soft at first, barely even a cry, but the tone caught his ears like whistling of the wind and gave him pause. He waited 1 second, 2, 3. Finally, after 10 seconds, he heard it again, this time far more clearly. His breath caught as the tone danced across his ears again, this time far more clear. "LP," a voice. Immediately, Native snapped to attention, activating his quirk and feeling the world sharpen around him. Immediately, he felt like his senses had kicked into overdrive, and the familiar sting of a headache permeated his skull. Still, he persevered, focusing on the sound of the voice and feeling his senses leave his body. His quirk had always been an odd one. It allowed him to sharpen one sensation at the cost of others. Here, he was sacrificing his sense of touch and smell to amplify his hearing to an incredible degree. He heard the wing beats of a fly like the echoing of helicopter blades. Mice scurrying along the ground pounded like an army of horses rushing across a grassy plain. Finally, he caught the voice, sharp and clear from an alley to his left. "Help me, please." Native rushed into the alley, the odd lack of sensation as his feet tapped the ground, something he had always struggled to get used to. But he followed the trail of the sound, turning the corner and seeing the origin of the soft plea. Deactivating his quirk, Native felt the world crash down on him again, observing the source of the sound with care. It was a boy, likely no older than 16. He was crouched against a wall, coated in only a plain t-shirt and some jeans. His red shoes were scuffed and torn with use, and his green hair was matted and coated with either sweat or BLD. However, Native immediately noticed the bandages covering the boy's stump of an arm, and matching gauze wrapped around part of the kid's head. He rushed forward, kneeling down next to the kid. "Hey," Native spoke, calmly, "you okay?" He stopped, waiting for the boy to provide his name. "Midoriya," the boy spoke. He had a bit of BLD leaking down his lip, and his one exposed eye was bruised slightly. The boy appeared to be heaving, perhaps an internal injury as well. "Midoriya," Native confirms, pulling out some supplies from his belt. "Can you tell me what happened?" "I was attacked." The boy coughed out his response, causing Native to put a hand on his shoulder for support. It happened so fast. 1 second I was walking down the street, another second I'm lying here and... There, gone. The boy quivered, and Native felt himself lean closer to the injured boy. "Okay, Midoriya, just stay here and I'll radio for help." Native made to reach into his jacket, but as soon as his arm moved, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, followed by something heavy impacting his back and knocking him to the ground. Native hit the ground strong, letting out a wheeze as the air was squeezed from his lungs. He turned his head, seeing a dark figure standing over him, and a blade embedded into his shoulder. The figure was staring down at him with a malicious glare, his beady eyes swimming with unrestrained rage. The wide mouth of the figure has been twisted into a sneer, and the various sharp objects littered around the man's body spoke gospels as to who this man was. "Hero killer," Native spoke with effort, trying to calm the turning of his stomach and the freezing of his BLD. The villain's sneer only seemed to grow, before twisting into a sickening grin. Native felt pressure in his shoulder, the thrumming of BLD pumping towards his wound, before the sickening ripping sensation of the blade being removed. He yelped in pain, feeling warm his own BLD drip onto his face as the hero killer lifted the knife to his gaping maw, extended his thick, warty tongue, and gave it a savoring lick. Native feels his body completely lock in place. His muscles and joints freeze, and no matter how much he wants to shift, to squirm, to do anything, but his body simply wouldn't listen to him. He knows he is terrified. He had never been so scared in his life, but he knows that this paralysis was not due to fear. Was it a quirk? Or perhaps some kind of poison? Native didn't know. And looking at the sadistic glee on the hero killer's face, he likely would never know. I must say, Midoriya, the hero killer praised, I wasn't so sure at first, but your plan worked like a charm. Native felt his heart stop as he turned to the boy in front of him, who was now standing, dusting his clothes off slightly, and looking at the hero killer. His expression had completely changed. Gone was the stuttering and shivering. Now, he stands tall, if a bit hunched from his injuries. His eye, once dark and reflecting fear, now seems to have sharpened. The eye shifts down to Native, who looks up at Midoriya with shock as the boy glares at him. There is rage behind that eye, a hatred that boils shallowly below the surface. But Native can also see conflict ion in the green orb, a hesitation suppressed by the boy's fury. I told you, Midoriya said, this was the most successful option. With that, Native feels the pieces finally click into place. This was all a ruse, a trick to get him into a position where he can't fight back. And he fell for it. This is terrible, Midoriya states bluntly, after hearing Stain's plan to take down Native. Stain's expression twists into a scowl, and his posture gets more hostile. I've been doing this for years, boy. He warns, I think I know the process far better than you do. Maybe, Izuku admits, but you are missing several factors that change this particular target. Izuku walks over to the board, where several objects are scattered around it, and pinned in place with blades. He begins to remove the blades, shifting objects around, all while talking with Stain. Your strategy relies on your usual ambush takedown approach, and while effective, you are ignoring the factor of Native's quirk. Izuku plants a photo of Native in the center of the board. Not only does Native's normal patrol route not have many places where an ambush would work, if you did try to get him in any of these blind areas, his quirk might alert him of your presence. Izuku continues to shift the pictures and objects around, and Stain's posture relaxes, becoming more pensive. How can you be so sure that Native's quirk will be active when I strike? How can you be sure it won't be active? Izuku rebuts. In truth, I don't know if it will or won't be, but I know a way to make sure it won't be. Stain seems conflicted, but the logic behind the boy's words eats at him slightly, so he relents. Fine, then what do you recommend? In truth, your original plan is mostly sound, but needs some tweaking. Izuku grabs another knife, one of the many strewn about the floor, and digs it into the board. Instead of a classic ambush, you should modify your approach so that he activates his quirk in a way that benefits you. Izuku pauses, letting his hands move automatically. Native's quirk enhances one of his senses at the sacrifice of two others. By nullifying 2 of his 5 senses, Native can supercharge one of them, making him the ultimate scout. In addition, Izuku continues, Native's quirk has a cooldown element to it, where those 2 senses remain nullified, but his enhanced sense returns to normal, and he can't use it again for a few minutes at least. Based on general consensus, Native is likely to nullify either taste or touch immediately, but if we can get him to enhance his hearing, there is a good chance we can force him to use his quirk, then turn it off before he notices you. That should lead to an effective ambush. Okay, Stain admits, this idea sounds good, but how exactly are we going to lure him into using his quirk? Easy. Izuku slams a dagger into the side of the board. We'll use bait. Izuku gestures to himself. If I fake some injuries and call for help, that should cause him to hyperfocus. If need be, he'll come up with a story of a robbery to get his attention. But your injuries are old, Stain comments. What if he gets suspicious because of the age of your injuries? Izuku stops, his mind racing as he tries to find a solution. He sighs and nods. Yes, so maybe I need some more recent injuries. He looks to the hero killer, who seems a bit shocked by his statement, but nods, approaching Izuku. Are you sure about this? Izuku prepares to give his consent, but he feels his mind start to question his decisions. Yeah, his mind asks, are you sure about this? He feels himself pause at his mental conflict ion, which gives his mind a chance to push on his hesitation. This isn't right, he thinks. You know this, Izuku. This isn't some plan to embarrass the hero course. This is murder. Premeditated murder. Izuku feels himself shiver, but the voice in his head continues. You can still back up, still turn away, and go home. You don't have to do this. Sure, another voice pipes up. You don't have to do this. He can almost hear the second voice mocking his indecision. You can always just go home, back to a world that hates you, a mother that ignores you, a school that doesn't care about you, and live a life where you always were and always will be nothing. The word hits Izuku like a truck. Nothing. A word he had become familiar with all his life. A word that had been stamped to his life like a brand. He hated that word, the dismissiveness of that word, and he refused to be defined by it anymore. I'll show them all, Izuku thinks before nodding to Stain, who shrugs off his cloak. I'll show them that I'm not nothing. Stain's fist impacts Izuku's stomach, but the boy barely grunts in pain. This pain, this feeling. He'll endure, he always had. Is everything in place? A voice calls out from the shadows. He saw a man salute from the illumination of a lavish, open door, the hallway lit with bright, warm lights. Yes, sir. The man salutes. He eyes the shadowed figure in the chair, the visage of their spiky hair and long, pointed nose highlighted by the low light from the hall. Everything is ready for your signal. All we need to do right now is figure out which cell to activate. The shadowy figure nods, seeming to be lost in thought, but he can't help but notice the trepidation on his subordinate's face. Is something bothering you, Trumpet? Redestro leans forward, his face coming fully into view. Trumpet stiffens, his arms shooting to his sides. No, sir. Nothing is wrong, sir. Trumpet salutes his leader, who shakes his head at the man. Trumpet, Redestro chides. You are one of my most loyal subordinates, but you are also one of my most trusted advisors. The leader of the Meta Liberation Army leans back, before standing up, approaching the shorter man. If I count on anybody to question my judgment, it would be you. So, if you have concerns about the plan, then I order you to air them. Trumpet still seems to hesitate, but sighs and nods. If I am to be honest, I do not like this plan. Redestro nods, but Trumpet quickly adds context before he can interject. It's not that I don't understand the importance of the file, but to go to this extreme to gain one file, no matter how strong, it seems like a waste, frankly. The leader of the Meta Liberation Army nods. I can understand your hesitation, my friend. He puts a hand on Trumpet's shoulder, but you must understand that the importance of Harpocrates cannot be understated. If we can gain access to it, then everything from this point onward becomes so much easier. He walks Trumpet over to his chair, where a chessboard lay flat on a table. We are fighting a war, Trumpet, Redestro declares. He picks up a pawn from the white piece side and plants it down in front of a rook that lay on the table. Sometimes in a war, you need to make sacrifices in order to make meaningful gains. The taller man picks up the black rook, knocking over the pawn. But these sacrifices, while necessary, are never in vain. While we may lose one tool, we gain so much more in the process. Redestro slides a bishop down the board, past the space that was once blocked by the rook, and takes an exposed queen, crippling the black piece's forces. Trumpet clings to every word like a lifeline, finding himself nodding along with his MS-tar. The zealot looks up at his leader, who smiles down at him. So, Redestro continues, it is a matter of which cell to activate. Trumpet nods. Yes, sir. We have a few options set up, some less integral cells to our cause, but ones that can still draw attention from outside heroes and distract them while we commence the operation. Trumpet pulls out a list and holds it up. If I may suggest a few, we have one cell in dash. Hosu. Trumpet pauses, looking up at Redestro. I am sorry, sir. The Hosu cell, Redestro reaffirms, it should serve perfectly. Close enough to the central province to draw relevant heroes away from their primary guard. Populated enough to cause panic, but under-patrolled by heroes enough to require significant outside aid. He reaches over to the chessboard, moving a knight forward on the board. Activate the Hosu cell, code Gamma. It is best that our public involvement is kept a secret, and we don't want this chaos to be traced back to us. Trumpet considers Redestro's words for a mere moment, but nods, agreeing with his leader. As you command, Redestro. With that, Trumpet turns the corner and pulls out his phone, dialing a very specific number. Izuku looked down at Native, whose body had gone rigid under the influence of Stain's quirk. The hero had been pinned to the ground, and although Stain rose up from his knee, Moving himself off of the downed hero, Native made no move to stand, or move at all. Instead, his still figure remained motionless, like a statue in the wake of time. Stain moved back, slowly drawing his katana from his back, the slow sound of metal leaving its sheath echoing all around the alley. Izuku looked at the blade, the steel of its surface reflecting the low light of the setting sun, and reflecting a mirror of his bandaged face back at him. He saw the bandaged half of his face, and the visage of his still-present eye, and it was like the weight of these events finally hit him. This man in front of him, the hero that he had spoken to less than a minute ago, was going to die, and he would be at least partially responsible for it. Of course, he knew that this was going to happen, but the true impact of this event was only now becoming clear. It is one thing to plot the death of another person, it was another entirely for him to go through with it. He saw the blade turn, lifting above Stain's head, and aiming down in a stabbing motion towards the hero's throat. Wait! Stain stopped, the blade still poised to strike above Native's neck. Izuku was as shocked by the objection as any, and especially shocked by the fact that he was the one to utter it. I told you before, Stain spat at the boy, his eyes never leaving the downed hero, that I would not accept anyone interrupting my work or slowing me down. His grip on the sword tightened, causing his fist to quiver. So, there had better be a good reason that you're stopping me now. Izuku's brain froze at the malice in Stain's voice. The hero killer wasn't loud, no. He was quiet, his tone measured. That was almost more terrifying to the injured boy than Stain's zealous roars. He desperately tried to find a good reason for his interruption. Why did I do that? Izuku scrambled mentally. Why did I stop him? Isn't this what I wanted? Izuku was desperately grasping at straws. You never told me why you're going after Native. The boy knew he had made that up on the spot, but he had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. Stain had turned to look at Izuku, seeming to regard him with a quizzical gaze. Why does it matter? Stain questions. Why do you need to know what he did? You are the one who told me that you go after the fake heroes, Izuku continued, carefully, like addressing a rabid dog. You made it clear that the heroes you go after are not real heroes. I want to know why you say Native isn't one. Stain paused for a short time, considering Izuku's words. Finally, he lifts the blade and stands up straighter, putting off his crusade for a moment. This person is an example of the rot that has accumulated in society. He points down at Native, who is still paralyzed, but by his expression, is both confused and terrified. He flaunts the name hero as a status symbol, but only desires to become one to gain fame and fortune. He talks openly and frequently about how he feels that the world owes him a favor, how he deserves the fame just because he decided to be a hero. Stain stamps his heel down into Native's back, causing the paralyzed hero to yelp in pain. Heroes are meant to protect people, not seek social gain. They should longing only to help people and protect the innocent. But this Stain lying before me only seeks to enrich himself and his life. He is exactly what the word hero has come to mean. Izuku is stunned by Stain's ranting, letting the hero killer's words sink in. That's why you're going after Native. That's the only reason. Why should there be another reason? Stain spits, causing Izuku to flinch back. This is the core problem with heroes of the modern age. This mentality is what leads to people like Crest, to people like Katsuki Bakugo. The mention of Bakugo causes Izuku to boil with anger, but another emotion comes to the forefront of his mind, a realization. But Izuku continues to argue. But this is different from Crest. Izuku looked up towards Stain. Crest used his influence to do horrible things. From what you've said, Native hasn't done anything wrong yet. Why give him the chance? Stain's eyes were growing manic, and Izuku felt his bull-D begin to pump faster as adrenaline flooded him. All heroes are the same. They claw at every ounce of power they can gain, and when they have enough, they use that power to abuse the weak, lording their influence over them like an edict from God. But how is that different from any hero? Izuku shouts, causing Stain's eyes to widen. Every hero cares about their image. As much as I hate it, to single one person out for it makes no sense. Izuku chuckles with frustration. Hell, Even All Might only cares about his eye dash, the sound of a knife whizzing past Izuku's head, followed by a thunk of the wall behind him, causes Izuku to pause. He feels something wet dripping down the left side of his head, and reaches up, running his fingers along the shallow cut along his cheek. The distinct metal tang of BLD fills his nostrils, and he looks up, seeing Stain's hand outstretched, where the knife had flown from, and glaring at Izuku with a potent air of malice. "Don't you ever," Stain spits, "compare trash like this to All Might." Izuku is stunned by Stain's rage, confused and worried as the man continues to rant. All Might is so much more than just a hero. He is an icon, the ideal monolith of what a hero should be. The hero killer turns and growls at Izuku, thumbing another knife on his waist. "I will not sit here and allow you to slander someone as pure as him." "What?" Izuku's mind is frozen, looking at the hero killer as the man glares back at him. Did I hear him right?" Izuku shakes his head, the world seeming to go still around him. He sees All Might as the perfect hero. Izuku's mind races. "That doesn't make sense. I have seen All Might, met him. I was crushed by him." Izuku's head pounds, taking in the situation again. How could Stain be so wrong about him? Any and all heroes who dare to besmirch the name of those like All Might are trash. Nothing but swine waiting for my blade. Stain roared. "I will not suffer their putrid existence any longer." Stain lifts the blade once again, poised to carve the life out of the hero underneath him, and feels the muscles tense, ready to dive his blade down. Suddenly, there is a loud bang. The street begins to shake, and Izuku looks up at the sky, seeing large plumes of smoke rising from the buildings around them. Rubble seems to litter the streets from the exposed alley, and there is a rising crescendo of cries of fear from the streets, and then thunderous roars of footfalls growing louder and louder as a cavalcade of panicking citizens rush past them, storming past the alleyway, shouting in fear and confusion. Izuku looks back to Stain, who seems almost more confused than he is, and immediately turns to look out of the alley. Dodging the rushing of people running his way, he tries to make out what they may be running from, only to see a massive plume of dancing fire, framing a large department store. Izuku catches sight of fire bellowing out of the shattered windows, and the screams of people as they run away, as well as the sight of some who were not so fortunate, lying on the street just outside of the store. Another explosion echoes out, this one further away, and Izuku sees another bout of smoke rising in the distance. He hears sirens begin to belt in the distance, as well as more screaming, and can only stare at the flames rising from the department store in horror. "What?" Izuku gulps. "What's happening?" Gamo Hiroya stepped lightly down the paths of the department store, his girlfriend, Soga Rizusa, clinging to his arm, giggling to herself as they walked. They had just finished a lovely date, and she wanted to pick up some groceries so they could cook together back at her apartment. She gasped, letting go of his arm and rushing over to a display case, holding several brightly colored candies. She lifts them up, showing them to Gamo, who laughs with her. "You really like those, don't you?" Soga nods, giggling to him. "Yes. I haven't had any of this brand since I was a kid. My parents told me it was too childish and refused to let me have any." Gamo gives the girl a fond smile and picks a bag of the candy up, putting it into the bag when he hears a beep on his phone, signifying a text message. He lifts his phone out of his pocket and reads the text, noting they are from an unknown but familiar number. Activation signal. Libero code. Gamma. The code disappears, and his phone turns dark, being deactivated remotely. But immediately, Gamo's casual smile drops from his face, the candy and basket falling in tandem from his grasp. His eyes harden, the warm brown turning cold, as his arms grow rigid, feeling the code sink in. Out of the corner of his eyes, he sees Soga looking at him with concern, but Gamo turns away from her, rolling up the sleeves on his coat and activating his quirk, lighting small fires with his fingers. At this moment, Gamo Hiroya is dead. All that is left is the soldier, lighter. He turns back to Soga, whose confused expression erupts into horror as he lifts a can of hairspray to his hands and squeezes the trigger, letting a bout of flame erupt down the aisle. The screams of Soga and the others in the aisle echo out as the flames lick their clothing and catch their skin, causing them to ignite. Lighter pays them no mind, though, seeing them run for the exit, fire on their clothes, screaming. He turns, seeing several other people looking down the aisles, who look at him and nod. He nods back to them, finding several flammable objects and throwing them onto the ground. One of his comrades moves towards the door, lowering the gate and trapping the civilians inside. They nod, and Lighter moves towards the pile of pitch, lighting it and causing people to panic, running to the door. Outside of the glass windows and doorway, he sees people on the streets catching notice. Civilians from all walks of life staring at the closed gate in confusion, others trying desperately to see into the shop. Not that it would matter. Another member of the cell moves towards a worker, wearing a tag that said manager emblazoned in gold on the lapel. He grabs the man, hand morphing into a small blade, before he jams his hand into his throat, slicing the manager's throat open. Reaching into the man's pocket, he throws Lighter the key, who nods, walking to the end of the building labeled maintenance. By that time, the hostages had reached the front door, grabbing the gate and trying to move it with all their might. Others had taken to trying to throw heavy objects through windows. His brothers in arms looked to him, and Lighter nodded, before turning back to the maintenance door. He hears several sickening squelches and crunches as the others tend to the hostages, followed by loud shouting and screaming. But he pays it no mind, walking down into the basement, and is met with a large natural gas tank for heating. Opening the valve, he hears some of the gas escaping and lifts his hand, lighting his fingers once again and moving them to the escaping gas. And with one last smile, Lighter fulfills his duty, the building erupting into an inferno and taking him with it. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Genius Deku Challenged the World Without a Quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to JayDeeKay for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.